Blythe Valley still feel discriminated against in such areas as free sign language classes and educational opportunities for deaf children in schools. Would my right honourable friend agree with me there is still much more can be done to improve the lives of people in our communities?
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are passionate about improving opportunities for deaf people who use BSL and to increase general public understanding of deaf people's language and culture. Linguistic exclusion is a problem and can affect education, jobs and more.
We now come to the top of the Scott Benson.
Question 1, sir.
Thursday.
Mr. Speaker, I commend the women's organisations such as Women's Aid who have come out in recent months to support single-sex services for women who suffered violence and abuse. Service providers know that single-sex spaces are crucial to recovery from abuse and violence for many women and children. The Equality Act recognises this and allows for the restriction of single-sex spaces on the basis of biological sex. The law is clear, it's on their side, and we will defend it.
Scott Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Reducing inequalities is about much more than protected characteristics. Outcomes for education, health and prosperity in Blackpool are among the lowest in the entire country and are particularly poor for men. What steps is my right honourable friend taking to ensure that those who live in Blackpool can enjoy exactly the same life chances as those living in more prosperous areas?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in March, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities announced that Blackpool would be a transformational regeneration place. This means the government will partner with Blackpool to address social inequalities, improve productivity and deliver coordinated cross-government support for local priorities. And we've already announced measures to support this, including cracking down on rogue landlords and Homes England partnering with Blackpool Council to find exciting new opportunities for regeneration.
Mr. Speaker, according to an equalities assessment undertaken by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the UK Government was aware that women and girls were more likely to be harmed by cuts to the UK foreign aid budget. The Tories' recent international development strategy lists their new approach as being framed around education, empowerment and ending violence against women and girls, however does not detail any explicit funding commitments for this. What discussions has the Minister had with her colleagues in FCDO about the impact of the aid cuts to women and girls abroad?
Mr. Speaker, I was very clear in my appearance at the International Development Select Committee that we are restoring the budget for women and girls for development, including providing 12 years of education for all girls.
Another turn.
Last week I held a reception in Parliament to launch the first only female veterans charity in the UK, Saluta. Whilst there are over 1,800 veterans charities, this is the only one run by women for women. Now, we know female veterans have specific needs, so what discussions has my right honourable friend had with the Office of Veterans Affairs to better support female veterans?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend on her championing of female veterans. She's absolutely right that we need to deliver services to female veterans that meet their needs and honour their fantastic contribution to the armed forces. And that's why the Office of Veterans Affairs will commission new research to understand why female veterans need support and the barriers they face.
And Jarvis.
Thank you. Last year, the MOD pledged to develop a strategy on rape and on serious sexual assault. This was long overdue. So can I ask the Minister what conversations she's having with colleagues in the MOD about the strategy and about the wider treatment of women in our armed forces?
Thursday.
Well, we're working very closely on this issue. It's vitally important that female service personnel are treated fairly and with respect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the most unequal workplaces in the land is actually the other place where 1/8 of the seats are reserved for men only. Will the Secretary of State support a rapid change in the law so that hereditary peerages, just like the Crown, go down through the first and oldest child rather than the oldest son?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady is referring to reform of the succession to the hereditary peerage, which I'm sympathetic to, but it does raise a variety of complex issues. Various approaches have been proposed in both houses to address the issue of male primogeniture for hereditary peerages, but there is not yet a consensus of the way forward. But I'm very happy to work with my honourable friend in looking at this issue.
Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week is Carers Week, and I hope the Minister will agree with me that unpaid carers make an invaluable contribution to our society but are often unseen. So will she commit to making being an unpaid carer a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, as Carers UK have called for?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not able to give that commitment, but I do look forward to joining her and others at the reception this afternoon with Carers UK, because there are very many important issues on how we can support unpaid carers.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The cost of a full-time nursery place for children under 2 has risen by 16% in the past 5 years. And for the first time in decades, the number of women leaving the workforce has increased. Does the Minister for Women and Equalities think that this government's failed approach to childcare, which is pricing some women out of work and others out of parenthood, is remotely acceptable? And what recommendations is she making to the Treasury and the Department for Education to sort this problem?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're absolutely determined to bring down the cost of childcare, to fix the regulations that make the cost so high, and we'll be bringing forward proposals very shortly.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, this government promised that a comprehensive women's health strategy would be published last year, but we are still waiting, and meanwhile, waiting lists continue to soar. So, Secretary of State, given that waiting lists for women waiting for gynecological services is now in excess of 570,000, a 60% increase on pre-pandemic levels, isn't it time that this government stops trying to protect constantly the job of a lame duck Prime Minister and actually gets on with resolving the day-to-day issues affecting women in our country?
Minister.
As I've said in answer to many questions this morning, the Women's Health Strategy will be published shortly. We had over 100,000 responses. We published our vision document in December, and we will be publishing the Women's Health Strategy in the coming weeks.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We now start with questions to Prime Minister. Dame Angela Riedel.
Question number 1.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this week is Carers Week, and I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in thanking the millions of carers across the UK for all they do to support their loved ones. We've seen the vital role carers have played in our communities during the pandemic, and we all owe them a debt of gratitude. Through our reforms on adult social care, this government is committed to continuing to support carers. And Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dame Angela Riedel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the importance of carers in our country. This week's events, Mr. Speaker, have demonstrated just how loathed this Prime Minister is. And that's only in his own party. So, as his administration is too distracted by its internal divisions to deal with the challenges we face, can the Prime Minister explain if 148 of his own backbenchers don't trust him, why on earth should the country?
Prime Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady very much for her question, and I can assure her that in a long political career so far, I have, of course, picked up, barely begun, I have, of course, picked up political opponents all over the place. And that is because this government has done some very big and very remarkable things which they did not necessarily approve of. And what I want her to know is that absolutely nothing and no one, least of all her, is going to stop us with getting on for delivering for the British people.
Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The whole House will unite behind the Prime Minister on his determination to hold Ukrainian war criminals to account. But is he aware that there are 5 alleged Rwandan war crimes perpetrators living freely in the UK who have been doing so now for 16 years and have neither been extradited nor put before the British courts under our existing laws? As he prepares to go down to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, will he look carefully at this issue, because it is bound to be raised with him, and will he reassure the House and the Rwandan government he takes these matters extremely seriously, and what has so far been justice massively delayed for 16 years will not be grotesquely denied?
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for his question, and he raises an issue on which the UK has campaigned for a long time, and no country is more committed than we are to bringing war criminals to justice. I know that my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, has raised the subject recently with the International Criminal Court. However, as he knows, and I will certainly, of course, study the case and take it up as appropriately, it is the subject of an ongoing investigation. It would not be appropriate for me to comment on it further.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't make out whether that introductory noise was cheers or boos. The trouble is, I don't know whether it's directed at me or him. I joined the Prime Minister in his comments about carers. Why did his Culture Secretary, I think hiding along the bench, say that successive Conservative governments left our health service wanting and inadequate when the pandemic hit?
Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that when the pandemic hit, it was an entirely novel virus for which the whole world was unprepared. And nobody at that stage, nobody knew how to test for it. Nobody knew what the right quarantine rules should be, Mr. Speaker. But as it happened, the UK government and our amazing NHS produced, not only approved the first vaccine anywhere in the world. We were the first to get it into anybody's arms, Mr. Speaker, and we had the fastest rollout anywhere in Europe, none of which would have been possible if we'd listened to him.
I think the Prime Minister just agreed with the Culture Secretary. Perhaps she said it. They didn't deny it. Perhaps she said it because it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
It starts with GPs. People were unhappy with the service they were getting before the pandemic. Not enough GPs. Too hard to get an appointment. That's why he promised 6,000 new GPs. But his Health Secretary admits he won't keep that promise. Despite the hard work of doctors, people can't see a GP in person. They're unhappier than ever with GP services. If GP provision was wanting and inadequate before the pandemic, what is it now?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid he's simply wrong, because he's wrong about what we're doing. And of course, Mr. We've got to clear the COVID backlogs, and everybody understands that. Everybody understands the pressure that the NHS is under. But they are responding magnificently, and I can tell him that thanks to the investments that this government has put in, we now have 4,300 more doctors. We have record numbers. We have record numbers in training, and to the best of my we have 11,800 more nurses this year than last year, Mr. Speaker, and 72,000 in training, and that is because of the investment that we put in, which was opposed by the party opposite. And the only reason we were able to make that investment, Mr. Speaker, is because we have a strong and robust economy, thanks to the decisions we took.
Mr. Speaker, of course he talks big, but I've got a letter here to the Prime Minister from the honourable member from Hereford and South Herefordshire. He said, this is you, Prime Minister, under you the government seems to lack a sense of mission. It has a large majority but no long-term plan. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's Big Plan Act is so tired that even once loyal MPs don't believe him. And it's not just waiting for a GP, it's waiting for all NHS treatment. Take cancer. For over a decade, waiting times for cancer care have been going up. His solution was supposed to be diagnostic hubs. The Health Secretary has been on a victory lap this week. But here's the rub, Prime Minister. Since they were opened last year, 135,000 extra people are now waiting for scans and tests. Can he think of a better way to describe soaring cancer waiting lists than wanting and inadequate?
Mr. Speaker, it is entirely right after the pandemic that people are now coming forward to get their cancer tests, and we have actively encouraged that, and that is the right thing for people to do. But as a result of the community diagnostic hubs that we are bringing in, 100 of them across the country, Mr. Speaker, we are able to cut the times for cancer diagnosis, help people to get their scans, their tests faster, and above all, we can do that, Mr. Speaker, because we're hiring more radiographers, we're hiring more nurses, we're hiring more professionals in our NHS because of the investments that we made, which, as I say, the party of Bevan tragically opposed.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is the cancer waits have been going up for 10 years, and they're even higher now. So blaming the pandemic just won't wash. Perhaps the Culture Secretary was talking about the state of NHS buildings. Before the pandemic, the NAO said they were a risk to patients. The government's response, paint jobs and fix-ups, pretending that's the same as building new hospitals. The Treasurer and the Cabinet Office apparently don't think that the refurbs are even going to be delivered. Take University Hospital North Tees. The ceiling is falling in, the roof leaks, and staff have to hose down the pipes to stop them freezing over. Failure to fix wanting and inadequate NHS buildings is putting patients at risk, isn't it, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, this line of criticism is satirical, coming from a Labour government, attacking our hospital building programme, Mr. Speaker, where they were the authors of the PFI scheme that bankrupted so many hospitals. Mr. Speaker, what we're doing instead is building 48 new hospitals. Yes, we are. Thanks to the biggest capital investment programme in the history of the NHS. From memory, we put £33 billion as soon as we came in, then another 92 to cope with the pandemic, plus another £39 billion in the health and care levy. They opposed that funding. They opposed the health and care levy. They don't have a leg to stand on. We're building the foundations of our NHS's, our health services' future, and they should support it.
Can I just say to both of you, you need to calm down, and there's two over here as well. The four of you could have a very nice cup of tea if you wish. Keir Starmer.
Oh dear. Prime Minister, Dear, dear, dear. Prime Minister, pretending. Mr. Speaker, pretending no rules were broken. Prime Minister, he chunters on. Pretending no rules were broken didn't work. Pretending the economy is booming didn't work. And pretending to build 40 new hospitals won't work either. They want him to change, but he can't. As always with this Prime Minister, when he's falling short, he just changes the rules and lowers the bar. In March, he proposed changing the NHS contract. He wants to double the length of time patients can be made to wait for surgery, from 1 year to 2 years. On top of that, he scrapped zero tolerance of 12-hour waits at A&E. 24 hours at A&E used to be a TV programme. Now it's his policy. Well, it's Health Week. And he's telling all of them.
Order! Mr. Cleverlake, we've got a Tea Party gathering. I'm sure you don't want to be part of it. I will hear the question. The problem is, so do our constituents. I wonder if I were you, and I think one or two of you might be going early, what I would say is, look, I need to hear the question in the same way I expect to hear the answer. So please, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I bet they wish they were this organised on Monday. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's Health Week, and he's telling them he's going to turn over a new leaf. So why doesn't he start by scrapping his plans to greenlight wanting and inadequate NHS standards?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, look, I've got to tell him, I just think this line of attack is not working, Mr. Speaker. But it's not working. It's not working because they refuse to approve.
Once again, I think the two of you need to calm down. So please, we don't want to see an empty front bench, Prime Minister.
Look, we've not only raised the standards in the NHS, we're not only reducing waiting times for those who've had to wait the longest, Mr. Speaker, but what we're doing more fundamentally is doing what the people of this country can see is simple common sense, and that is using our economic strength to invest in doctors and nurses and get people on the wards, get people giving people their scans and their screens and their tests in a more timely manner and taking our NHS forward. We are on target, Mr. Speaker, thanks to this government, to recruit 50,000 more nurses. Thanks to the investments, I've just got to repeat this because he doesn't seem to have heard it so far, thanks to the investments that party opposed. Perhaps he can now explain why they opposed them.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, raising taxes because you failed to grow the economy isn't a plan for the NHS, and everyone sitting behind him knows it. Members of his cabinet admit that Conservatives left our health system wanting and inadequate when the pandemic hit. He's been in power for 3 years, and things are getting worse, not better. Fewer GPs, more waits for cancer tests, buildings still crumbling, and he's changing the rules to cover up his failure. And there is a real human pain as a result. Today I spoke to Hamza Semakula. Hamza is 20 and he plays semi-professional football for Hendon. He tore his ACL earlier this year. Because of the 2-year wait for surgery, he had to crowdfund for a private operation. I also spoke to Akshay Patel. Last year, his mother woke up unable to breathe. Akshay called 999 6 times. In his last call, he said, "I rang an hour ago for an ambulance as she had difficulty breathing, and now she's dead." Even he must admit that Akshay, Bina and Hamza deserve better than a wanting and inadequate government utterly unable to improve our NHS.
Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in the House has sympathy with Akshay and the other constituents and their families and the other constituents that he mentions, Mr. Speaker, and I share their feelings. But when you look at what this government is doing, the massive and I must say this to him, we are making colossal investments in our NHS. We are cutting waiting times. We're raising standards. We're paying nurses more. We're supporting our fantastic NHS. And by the way, he continually came to this. I just remind him of this and said that we had the worst COVID record in Europe. Turned out to be completely untrue. He still hasn't retracted it. We're doing it, Mr. Speaker. We can make those investments because of the strength of the UK economy, because of the fiscal firepower that we have to deploy. We have the lowest unemployment now since 1974, and we are going to continue to grow our economy for the long term. He asked about the mission of this government, Mr. Speaker. It is to unite and level up across our whole country, to unleash the potential of our entire country. The biggest tutoring programme in history for young people, raising literacy and numeracy standards for 11-year-olds from 65% adequacy to our 90%. That is the highest objective I think a government could achieve. Expanding home ownership for millions of people, as my right honourable friend for Duluth and I will do, for millions of people who currently don't have it. Cutting the costs of business to make this the enterprise centre of Europe. That is our vision. Creating high-wage, high-skilled jobs for this country. And as for jobs, I'm going to get on with mine, and I hope he gets on with his.
But I didn't know you were so popular. Come on.
Well, we love all of us.
Changing the subject completely, in North East Hertfordshire, we're very concerned about sewage overflows into our precious chalk streams. And this is damaging to the flora and fauna and also restricts the use of these precious streams for leisure. The Environment Bill included some important measures last year, and I welcome the fact that the government has consulted on its reduction plan for storm overflows. But when would we expect to see some meaningful improvements and some real reductions in the amount of sewage going into our rivers?
Yeah, well, I thank you very much, and I share his concern. I can tell him our sewage plan is the biggest investment on this by any government. We made it clear that the water companies must do more, Mr. Speaker, and actually we already are seeing improvements, but the regulator is ensuring that the water companies do more to deliver on their obligations. We will not hesitate to take further action as needed.
We now come to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in supporting our carers? Mr. Speaker, week after week, I've called on this Prime Minister to resign. I've been met with a wall of noise from the Tory benches. I thought they were trying to shout me down, but all this time... But all this time, Mr. Speaker, it turns out that 41% of them have been cheering me on. Because, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear, at least the numbers don't lie. 41% of his own MPs have no confidence in him. 66 of MPs across the House don't support him, and 97% of Scottish MPs want the Minister for the Union shown the door. We now have a lame duck Prime Minister presiding over a divided party in a disunited kingdom. So, how does the Prime Minister expect to continue when even unionist leaders in Scotland won't back him?
Prime Minister. I want to thank the right honourable gentleman for his characteristic warm words. And actually, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the biggest and most powerful and effective advocate of the United Kingdom over the last time that I've been in has been that man there. know how long he's going to last here as leader of the SNP, the Scottish National Congress. Long may he rest in place, Mr. Speaker. He is the Araldite that's keeping our kingdom together. I thank him for what he's doing.
Blackburn.
Well, I can say to the Prime Minister. I can say to the Prime Minister that I'll be standing shoulder to shoulder with our First Minister as we take our country to independence. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is acting like Monty Python's Black Knight, running around declaring it's just a flesh wound. And no amount of delusion and denial will save the Prime Minister from the truth. This story won't go away until he goes away. For once in his life, he needs to wake up to reality. Prime Minister, it's over. It's done. The Prime Minister has no options left, but Scotland does. Scotland has the choice of an independent future. Because it's not just the Prime Minister that we have zero confidence in. It's the broken Westminster system that puts a man like him in power. Exactly. Can he tell us, can the Prime Minister tell us how it is democratic that Scotland is stuck with a Prime Minister we don't trust, a Conservative party we don't support, and Tory governments we haven't voted for since 1955?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we had a referendum, as I've told the House before, in 2014. I think he should respect the mandate of the people. And he keeps saying that he wants his independence for his country. Our country is independent, Mr. Speaker. Our country is independent. Then he tried 48 times to reverse it to the leader of the opposition. And the only way that independence would ever be reversed is if we had the disaster, Mr. Speaker, of a Labour SNP coalition to take us back into the EU.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this week, the Prime Minister said, "You cannot spend your way out of inflation. You cannot tax your way into growth. We will cut the cost of government." Here, I completely agree. So when can I suggest a strong start that he scraps the inflated white elephant that is HS2, saving the government tens of billions of pounds from a budget that is spiralling out of control?
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend. In case you missed what else I said, we're cutting taxes, Mr. Speaker, for everybody who pays national insurance contributions by an average of £330, Mr. Speaker, just next month. And as for HS2, actually what it will do is deliver long-term growth and prosperity for the whole of the country, uniting and levelling up, deliver more revenues and put us in a better position to cut taxes in the future.
Speaker, today we hear reports that the Prime Minister refused to consult the First Treasury Council on his plans to rip up the protocol. Now, I know this question might be a bit redundant, given he might not be around very much longer. But given the Prime Minister's record of casual law breaking, will he give a commitment to the people of Northern Ireland that he will not break international law anytime soon?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell him that the reports that he's seen this morning are not correct. And what I can also tell him is that the most important commitment that I think everybody in this House has made is to the balance and symmetry of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. That is our highest legal international priority, and that is what we must deliver.
Dr. James Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The North Wales Mainline Railway has seen little investment for over a century. In practice, this means that jobs at Manchester Airport are poorly accessible to many of my constituents with a 2-hour commute, whereas a similar journey in the southeast of the country would be just 45 minutes. So will my right honourable friend ensure that the North Wales line features within the updated rail network enhancements pipeline at the decision to develop stage?
Yes. I my honourable friend. Listen, I'm a great enthusiast, Mr. Speaker, for this project. We are looking at it, and I can tell him that the Network Rail has received funding to carry out feasibility work on improving North Wales mainline journey times, and travellers in North Wales could have no more effective advocate than my honourable friend.
Kim Ledbeach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the Prime Minister's promises of new hospitals and more doctors and nurses, the Bronte Birth Centre at my local hospital in Batley and Spen is temporarily shut and is at risk of permanent closure due to staff shortages and lack of resources. The reality on the ground is that after 12 years of Conservative mismanagement, the NHS is broken. So can the Prime Minister explain to expectant parents in my constituency why, despite his promises, they are now forced to travel miles to give birth, and why his government voted against an effective long-term workforce plan for the NHS, proposed by his right honourable friend, the member for South West Surrey?
Prime Minister.
I thank her very much, and I will certainly look into what's the centre that she mentions in Batley and Spen. What I can tell her, though, is that across the country we are investing massively in staff, in premises, in technology, in diagnostic centres, and I'm afraid for the party opposite to carp and to criticise is frankly absurd, because they voted against the health and care levy that is putting billions into our NHS, and they need to sort out their position. Either they support it or they don't.
Hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend join me in complimenting Bradford on becoming the City of Culture in 2025? Could he also praise the team from Durham, who gave a fantastic representation of what County Durham had to offer? Bradford must really be extraordinary to have beaten us. In 2025, Durham will also celebrate the bicentennial of the Stockton to Darlington Passenger Railway, which will of course distract people from Bradford. I believe that my right honourable friend is the best person to lead on delivering levelling up for the North East. And to that end, can he encourage progress on the Furry Station development, reinvigorate the Leamside line, and help deliver a great county deal for County Durham?
I thank my honourable friend, and he and I have campaigned on it. I've been following his campaign on this for a long time, Mr. Speaker. I'm told that the Department of Transport is currently reviewing the business case for exactly what he has just requested. We're putting the funding in, Mr. Speaker, unlike anything the party opposite ever could have delivered.
Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Monday's confidence vote, the Prime Minister secured the support of just 2 out of Scotland's 59 MPs. That means out of the massed ranks of his Scottish Conservative colleagues, he got as much support as there are pandas in Edinburgh Zoo. The Prime Minister is an intelligent man. He must know that position's untenable. And if he's not going to do the decent thing and resign as the Prime Minister, surely it's past time he wrote a letter of resignation to himself to stand down as the Minister for the Union.
Prime Minister.
I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I really redirect the honourable gentleman to what I said to the right honourable gentleman, my friend, the leader of the SNP, because I think the more they campaign in the current circumstances for breaking up our United Kingdom with all the strength and all the merits that it has, I think the more damage they do to their own case.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supporting adults with a variety of mental health challenges, learning disabilities and conditions such as dementia. Last week, the Prince's Centre in Prince's Risborough in my constituency celebrated 10 years as an independent daycare provider. From my recent visit, it is quite clear what a happy, welcoming and supportive atmosphere has been created for all service users. So will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, join me in thanking and congratulating the manager, Kim Challoner, her whole team of staff, volunteers and trustees for delivering this first-class service? And as Chequers is but a hop, skip and a jump from Prince's Risborough, will he deliver those congratulations in person?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend, who's amongst his many other distinctions, I think my MP. I also join him in thanking the entire team at the Prince's Centre for everything that they do, and I will certainly keep his kind invitation in mind.
Abdul Khan.
Mr. Speaker,
I'd have more sympathy for the words get on with the job if it actually started in the first place. 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister told the House, to the best of my knowledge, everybody is getting their passport within 4 to 6 weeks. However, the Passport Office is currently quoting a 10-week service time, with many of my constituents waiting well over that period. Cancelled summer trips could cost families over £1 billion. Does the Prime Minister accept that the Passport Office backlog is placing additional pressure on families already struggling with the cost of living crisis?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is 91% are getting their passport within 6 weeks, I can tell him, Mr. Speaker. And we are putting hundreds and hundreds more staff into the Passport Office. And the strength of demand, by the way, is a sign of the robustness of the economy, because everybody is frankly wanting to go on holiday, and quite right too, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes to travel chaos, have we heard any condemnation yet from the opposition, from the RMT and their reckless and wanton strike? What about that,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend knows, Rochester-Stroud is facing unrealistic housing targets, putting pressure on the council to bring forward a local plan that would close successful working docks and the loss of beloved open spaces such as Deangate Ridge, all in the name of meeting an arbitrary target. Can my right honourable friend assure my constituents who are facing this level of overdevelopment that there will be greater flexibility on housing numbers so that the council can produce a local plan that delivers the appropriate housing but protects important sites like these?
Prime Minister. I thank my honourable friend, and she speaks, I know, for colleagues up and down the country. We want to make sure that councils are able to build in the right place and sensitively to local needs, and that is what we insist on. But I just want to make it one thing absolutely clear. Part of the merit, genius of levelling up, Mr. Speaker, is that it will encourage us to take some of the pressure, some of the heat out of the southeast of England, which has been overburdened for decades, and we can do it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Mark is trying to sponsor 2 sisters from Ukraine to come to the UK. These 2 sisters were housed in dangerous temporary accommodation in Montenegro for several weeks, while the UK Home Office refused to process the application of the youngest sister because she's 13 and travelling without her parents, even though she had her 18-year-old sister with her. The 18-year-old sister is now in London, and the 13-year-old sister has been sent back to her hometown in Ukraine, which is under siege. Can I ask the Prime Minister, can he tell me, hand on heart, does he think sending vulnerable children back to a war zone is the right policy?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, of course I understand her indignation about the case that she mentions, and I know that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be looking into it. But I have to say, I do think the record of this country in processing so far, I think well over 120,000 visas for Ukrainians is very creditable. I thank all the staff who've been involved in that effort.
Mr. Speaker, my right friend will remember that in March I asked him about increased research funding for aortic dissection as called for by the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust. Will the Prime Minister update me on the progress with this? Will he also recognise the immense value of the patient awareness videos that have been produced by TADCT featuring Whispering Bob Harris, survivors, relatives of patients, to help those going through this awful condition for the first time?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her fantastic work on this, and I know the personal circumstances that give her understanding of this campaign. I can tell her that the National Institute for Health Research is looking at what more we can do to support research on aortic dissection. I know that she's meeting my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra and the Kyiv Symphony Orchestra are due to visit the UK this summer to perform at the BBC Proms, the Edinburgh Festival and other venues. But while other European countries are waiving their visas, to get to the UK, the musicians are facing both visa delays and prohibitive visa costs of £18,000 and £10,000 respectively. We should be doing all we can to support these Ukrainian musicians. So will the Prime Minister match our European neighbours and enable these Ukrainian artists to tour to the UK this year by expediting their visa applications and waiving the visa fees?
I think she needs to bring the particular case to my right honourable friend. But I can tell the House what they know, and I know that many honourable members, by the way, are showing a lead by having Ukrainians to stay in their own homes. And I thank all honourable members for doing it. Thanks to the scheme that the UK government has put in place, I think we should be very proud of what we're doing.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows from his visits to Redcar and Cleveland that we enjoy miles of beautiful, uninterrupted coastline. However, since October last year, we've seen thousands of dead and dying crustaceans wash ashore. DEFRA conducted an investigation into this, which led to the theory of algal bloom being the primary cause for these deaths. However, this report does nothing to support the fishermen left devastated by this freak event through no fault of their own. Will the Prime Minister look at how he can support this vital industry to get them back on their feet?
Minister. I know my honourable friend and I were walking together on the seafront in Redcar when eating a lemon top, actually, Mr. Speaker, when somebody raised this very point with us, and I can tell him that we've ruled out chemical pollution, Mr. Speaker, but we are looking at we are making another £100 million of investment, including in communities such as his, and working with the fishing industry to help them recover from this problem.
Final question, Kenny McCaskill.
The poorest in this country currently pay the highest fuel costs through prepayment meters that have higher standing charges and higher tariffs. Belgium ensures a social tariff for the poorest and most vulnerable. As the perverse and pernicious euphemism of self-disconnection enters the lexicon, when in fact it's a politically imposed choice, not something chosen by individuals, is it not time that we provided a social tariff and ended the injustice of prepayment meters?
Prime Minister.
I thank him, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell him that what we're doing in the immediate, what we're doing right now, is helping 8 million families, 8 million households across the country with £1,200 of support, an extra £300 for pensioners who are in receipt of the cold weather payment, plus £400, Mr. Speaker, for every household in the country. And that is the support that we're giving right now to help people with the cost of energy. And the only reason we can do it, as I've said before to the House, is because of the strength of the economy and because of the brave, tough calls that we got right during the pandemic.
Right, that we know. I think the honourable member's been here long enough to know it comes after statements. We don't need to tell him the rules of the House. Right. Right, let us move on to the statement. I call the Secretary of State for Health, Sajid Javid.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'd like to make a statement on the independent leadership review of health and social care. This is an important report that comes at a critical time. This government is embarking on a huge programme of reform to tackle the COVID backlogs, to improve people's experience of the NHS and social care, and to place this system on a sustainable footing for the future. But we cannot seize this opportunity and deliver the change that is so urgently needed without the best possible health and care leadership in place. Because great leaders create successful teams, and successful teams get better results. So a focus on strong and consistent leadership at all levels, not just on those who have the word leader in their job title. This will help us in our mission to transform health and care and to level up disparities and patient experiences. This review, which I've deposited in the libraries of both houses, was tasked with proposing how to deliver a radical improvement in health and social care in the leadership that is across the United Kingdom, across England. It sets out a once-in-a-generation shake-up of management, leadership and training, as well as how we can make sure that health and care is a welcoming environment for people from all backgrounds. It's free from bullying, harassment and discrimination. So, Mr. Speaker, the review was led by General Sir Gordon Messenger, former Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, and by Dame Linda Pollard, the Chair of Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust. I'd like to thank them both for taking on this role and for providing their varied experience of leadership along with everyone else in their review team who has contributed to this important review. Before I turn to the recommendations of this review, I'd like to update the House on its findings. The review found that although there are many examples of inspirational leadership within health and social care, from ward to the board, these qualities are not universal. And I quote from the report, I quote, "There has developed over time an institutional inadequacy in the way that leadership and management is trained, developed and valued. As a result, careers in management aren't viewed with the same respect and prestige as clinical careers." The review also found too many reports to ignore, that was quoted in the report, of poor behaviour, and that the acceptance of bad behaviours like discrimination, bullying and responsibility avoidance has become, and I quote again, almost normalised in certain parts of the system. We must only accept the highest possible standards, the highest standards in health and care, where failures in culture and leadership can be making the difference between life or death. So we must do everything we can in our power to share and promote brilliant, innovative management and to act firmly where standards do fall short. This means culture change from the top of the system to the front line, and the review identifies a number of areas where improvement is needed. It makes 7 transformative recommendations, and I'd like to update the House quickly on each of them in turn. First, the review recommends new measures to promote collaborative leadership and to set a unified set of values across health and care. This includes a new national entry-level induction for new joiners to health and care and a new national mid-career programme for managers. Second, the review recommends that we should agree and set uniform standards for equal opportunities and for fairness, with more training to ensure that the very best leadership approaches become ingrained, and that the CQC must support this work by measuring progress through regular assessments. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't mean more people working in diversity, but fewer. In my view, there are already too many of these roles, and at a time when our constituents are facing some real pressures around the cost of living, we must spend every penny with care. Instead of farming out important work to a specific group of managers, it must be seen as everyone's responsibility, with everyone accountable for extending fairness and equal opportunities at work. Third, the review recommends a single set of unified leadership and management standards for NHS managers. These standards would apply to everyone, including those who work part-time and flexibly, with a curriculum of training and development to help people to meet them. This is well overdue modernisation, and completing this training should be a prerequisite to advance to more senior roles. Fourth, the review recommends a more simplified, standardised appraisal system for the NHS, moving away from variation in how performance and career aspirations are managed towards a more consistent system that takes into account how people have behaved, not just what they have achieved. Fifth, the review identifies a lack of structure around careers in NHS management. It proposes a new career and talent management function for managers at a regional level to oversee and support careers in NHS management and to provide clear routes to promotion along with training and development. Sixth, the review recommends that the recruitment and development of non-executive directors needs to be given greater priority due to their vital role in providing scrutiny and assurance. It proposes an expanded specialist appointments team in the NHS tasked with encouraging a diverse talent of pipeline talent. And finally, there is currently little or no incentive for leaders and managers to move into the most challenging roles, as the barriers are often seen as simply too high. But I want leaders in the NHS to seek out those roles and not shy away from them. It is essential that we address this and get great leaders into the areas that feel left behind. The review proposes an improved offer with stronger support and incentives to recruit top talent into these positions. Mr. Speaker, these are comprehensive, common-sense recommendations, and we will be accepting them in full. The recommendations have been welcomed by groups that represent people who work throughout the NHS, including the NHS Confederation and NHS providers. By taking this review forward, we can finally bring how we do health and care leadership into the 21st century. So we have the kind of leadership that patients and staff deserve right across the country, and we make sure that some of our country's most cherished institutions can thrive in the years that lie ahead. I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Shadow Secretary of State, Wes Streeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Secretary of State's picked quite the week to talk about standards in leadership. But I do want to say a huge thanks to NHS staff and leaders for the work they are doing against the most extraordinarily difficult backdrop. And I also want to thank General Sir Gordon Messenger and Dame Linda Pollard for carrying out this review. The 7 recommendations of the review are sensible, and I'm pleased the Secretary of State has already committed to implementing them. So as this is a rare example of decisiveness from the Health Secretary, can he tell us when he intends to publish his implementation plan? All too often, senior leadership of the NHS is in a place where it still doesn't represent the diversity of the population it serves. So instead of throwing red meat to his own backbenchers for reasons I think will probably be obvious to everyone, I'd like to hear how in particular he intends to ensure that equality, diversity and inclusion will be improved so we get the best leaders incentivised into the most challenging roles and able to provide inclusive healthcare for the breadth of diversity of our great country. And can he explain why this review has not covered leadership in primary care or social care in any detail? Surely this is a missed opportunity. And let's face it, Mr. Speaker, while he's trying to dress this up as the biggest shake-up in history, I'm not sure that giving staff an induction upon joining the NHS is a revolutionary development, and it hardly meets the scale of the challenge, because the NHS faces the biggest crisis in its history. Yeah. NHS staff are in a system under pressure like never before, and there are simply not enough of them. There are currently 106,000 vacancies across the NHS, and staff are leaving in droves. In some specialties, like midwifery, they're leaving faster than we can recruit them. Yeah. So I don't know how he expects NHS managers to demonstrate good leadership and deliver the best outcomes for patients when there aren't enough staff to lead. And for an organisation the size of the NHS not to have a plan for its workforce, one of the biggest employers in the world, is unbelievably negligent. What's the NHS meant to do until he eventually delivers his long-term workforce strategy, which he's been promising for some time? And how are managers meant to lead effectively when instead of thinking about patient care as their primary driver, they become buildings and facilities managers because the ceilings are falling in? And the only place that more than 40 new hospitals really exist is in the Prime Minister's imagination. Yeah. He said we should accept only the highest standards in NHS management. Well, let me ask him about not the generalities, but the specifics. Last month, it was reported that the North East Ambulance Service bosses oversaw cover-ups of negligence, leaving around 90 families not knowing how their loved ones died. That's right. He said yesterday he's still considering whether to launch a review. Is he seriously considering protecting managers who cover up bad practice instead of standing up for grieving families. Staff in the North East were reportedly paid to sign gagging clauses. I understand attempts to get them to sign gagging clauses are still underway. So in a written question, I asked how many NDAs have been signed in the NHS since the government said they would be banned in 2014. He doesn't know, and he's refusing to investigate the use of gagging clauses in the NHS. So how can he claim to be shaking up NHS culture and dealing with bullying when he's got no interest in what's going on under his nose? Of course the NHS needs good leaders, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes to examples of poor leadership in the NHS, the Health Secretary didn't need the messenger review, he just needed to look in the mirror. This is the man who described the NHS's blockbuster video in the age of Netflix as if this was the greatest revelation since Moses received the 10 Commandments. Who has been in government for the last 12 years? On his watch, on their watch, we have the highest waiting times in the NHS's history, the lowest patient satisfaction since 1997, longer waiting times for cancer in every year since 2010. Heart attack and stroke victims are left waiting around an hour on average for ambulances, and patients are at risk of serious injury because hospital buildings are crumbling around them. And he kicked off his own Health Week, expecting applause for the fact that despite his best efforts, there are still 9,000 people waiting more than 2 years for treatment. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that he knows, I know, NHS staff know, and the public know that with this government, NHS staff are lions led by donkeys, wanting and inadequate?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised by the typical response from the honourable gentleman. You're not really engaging with the real issue, showing once again he's more interested in theatrics than actually the real issues facing our NHS. Mr. Speaker, he started his comments trying to make some kind of joke about the leadership news this week, but we all know that the honourable gentleman is only interested in one leadership review in a political party in this House, and it's not the Conservative Party's leadership review that he's interested in. Now, when we look at the issues as he's raised, Mr. Speaker, he talks, actually rightly, he's talked about the importance of the workforce overall, that we need more doctors and nurses. He should know that we've got more doctors and nurses than ever before. We're recruiting at the fastest rate than ever before. 10,000 more nurses in the last year, over 4,000 more doctors in the last year, more in training than ever before. But he'll know to deal with these challenges, getting more workers, building those hospitals, which, by the way, all of those hospitals are on track. All of that requires proper funding, yet he and his party voted against the funding that the NHS needed to achieve that. And he also, again, he's actually right to talk about when things do go wrong in the NHS. Of course, they need to be properly investigated, as they were in Telford and Shropshire, and we learned about the terrible things that have been going on under successive governments in that trust, and when there is a need for other investigation, including independent ones like the one I've just asked for in Nottingham as well, that will be done. But he should understand that the best thing, what's far better than doing a review into things when they go wrong, is not having them go wrong in the first place. And that's why he should have welcomed this report.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an important review. Can I just say to my right honourable friend that there have been regular radical changes in the management of the NHS throughout my 25 years in this House. So I suggest he proceeds with care in relation to this. Leadership of the NHS, which he rightly says is important. Good leadership is important, for example, to ensure that we can deal with the COVID backlogs, includes consultants. Too many experienced consultants are leaving the NHS because of problems with their pensions. So will my right honourable friend now commit to an urgent review into this issue, including looking at the changing the abatement scheme?
Mr. Speaker, can I thank my right honourable friend for her comments, and I always listen very carefully to what she's got to say with her very important experience. On the pension issue, she will know that I believe in the 2020 budget that significant changes were made, especially to the taper rate, where it kicks in from £110,000 to £200,000. That benefited, I think, the top 5% of earners in this country, but it was the right thing to do to encourage and incentivise doctors in particular to work more. But she she's right to talk about what more we can do, and we are looking precisely at what further flexibilities we can offer in terms of pension arrangements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Health and Social Care Secretary talks about strong leadership and culture change. I'd like to point him at his government and his department's dismal record in meeting the pledge to close the inpatient units being used to trap more than 2,000 autistic people and people with learning disabilities, rather than supporting them in their own homes. We have just passed the 11-year anniversary of the scandal at Winterbourne View. Not only has his government failed in its pledge to close down units, which was the original promise made after that scandal, 560 people in inpatient units don't need to be there at all. A quarter of people in units are more than 50 kilometres from their own homes. People are spending longer in units now than they were 7 years ago. More people have been admitted to these units year on year from 2015-16. This is one of the biggest scandals and the worst failures that his government, his department has made. When is he going to act on this scandal?
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady is right to raise the importance of this issue, and she'll know that my predecessor had asked for a review that was done in this, that we'd accepted the outcome of that review, and it is being implemented. But I hope she will understand that in implementing the outcome of that review, that it's important that we listen to clinical advice from within the NHS and make sure we put the interests of each patient first.
Chair of the Select Committee, Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Health Secretary for this excellent report and also commend Sir Gordon Messenger and Dame Linda Pollard for their work in putting it together. It's got some very important recommendations. People who run hospitals are doing one of the most difficult jobs in Britain today, and anything we can do to give them better support in their careers will help all of us. But does he agree that the elephant in the room is that one of the things that makes their job most difficult is that we have more national targets in the NHS than any other health system anywhere in the world? And that means not only there's a risk of patients turning into numbers, but we remove the autonomy from managers to actually show the leadership that Sir Gordon is advocating in this report. So will he, as he implements the recommendations, agree to look at the role of national targets in the NHS and whether we need to simplify and reduce them?
Can I thank my honourable friend for his support of the report. Of course, he speaks with incredible experience. He's right to raise absolutely the importance of targets, and sometimes targets can have unintended consequences. And actually, the report does talk a bit about the importance of that issue. And I can assure him that as we make changes and work with our colleagues in the NHS to make reforms, that we will certainly be taking that into account.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the Secretary of State that not as he has seen over the years as an MP and Minister, you see some excellent, outstanding managers and leaders and some not so good managers and leaders. But isn't part of the problem is that and the former Prime Minister, the right honourable member for Maidenhead mentioned about continual structural changes, which adds to instability. We've got massive recruitment and retention problems. We have record numbers coming to use hospitals at the present time. So no matter what he does to purely in leadership and improvement there will not solve all those problems. And part of the problem is, of course, is that we do not have enough people to come forward to come into leadership roles. So can I say this to the Secretary of State in conclusion? Can I ask him about what point in the next 5 to 10 years would he expect to have solved the leadership crisis in the NHS?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman, he's absolutely right to talk about the importance of recruitment in the NHS, getting the right people in the first place, about retention, retaining those people, of course. But I hope he will recognise that in doing so, an important part is played by good leadership. This morning, I went to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. I think it's an outstanding hospital, it's incredibly well run. And I was hearing today there from the leadership team itself about the important role that they play in attracting talent and retaining it. So I hope he does recognise that.
Sir Desmond Sway.
Why is his departmental leadership advertising for a deputy director delivery for a COVID pass? What's that about?
The honourable friend, my honourable friend, in asking that question, I believe the reason that the department is keeps that under review is that although the pass has stopped and there's absolutely no prospect I can see of ever it coming back into place, that it is right that when we wind this down and work on the digital resources, that all things that are necessary are looked at appropriately.
Florence Echelome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Thursday, the 19th of May, Mr. Speaker, myself and a group of South London MPs met with South London nurses from the RNC. Secretary of State, they told us that they're tired. They told us that they're fed up. They told us that they are having to use food banks. They told us that they are seeing their salaries squeezed by the cost of living. They told us that they face bullying, intimidation, abuse at work. These were coming from staff members who work in our hospitals, including St Thomas's Hospital in my constituency, which I know that the Secretary of State has visited on many occasions. There's a big gap and omission around this leadership issue in social care, Secretary of State. Big retention, over 9,000 people in vacancy rates. Is the Secretary of State clear, and does he have a plan to address that big omission in health and social care, including retaining those people that we need on the front line?
Here. Mr. Speaker, the short answer is yes. She's right to talk about the importance of nurses and retaining those, as well as recruiting more nurses. When it comes to nurses' pay, she'll know that we gave a 3% rise last year when there was a freeze for the workforce in the public sector generally, and this year we'll be listening carefully to what the independent recommendation is.
Sir John Redford.
How many directors and chief executives of health bodies are there in the NHS? And what performance requirements are built into their contracts, because we want them to deliver high-quality care with falling waiting times?
Well, I couldn't give my right honourable friend the exact number that he's asked for, but what I can tell him, and I absolutely agree with him, is the latter part of his question, which is that we do want to see a massive improvement in appraisal and performance standards, and I'm sure when he gets to see the report in detail today, he'll be pleased by what he reads.
Graham Morris.
The Secretary of State said we must only accept the highest standards and act where standards fall short. My constituent, Paul Calvert, bravely exposed the North East Ambulance Service's management failures and indeed criminal negligence of cover-ups of patient deaths. Mr Calvert, who gave me his permission to raise his case, I met with him in person last week, has been bullied, harassed, blackmailed, but he still refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They offered him £41,000 on condition of his silence in destroying the evidence he has of wrongdoing. Tomorrow, we anticipate his employment's going to be terminated. Mr Calvert and grieving families want a public inquiry into the North East Ambulance Service. Does the Health Secretary agree? And will he outline how the Messenger Review will protect NHS whistleblowers like my constituent, Mr Calvert?
Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for bringing that to my attention about the particular case of Mr Calvert. My honourable friend, the Health Minister, has listened to that carefully as well. She is meeting with some of the families that have been affected by that very shortly, and Mr Calvert was someone she would reach out directly to as well. It is right that I'm very concerned about what I've heard about this ambulance service, as the honourable gentleman, as I'm sure the whole House is, and I'm not satisfied with the review that has been done already, and I do think that we need a much broader, powerful review, and I will be having more to say on this very shortly.
Mary Robinson.
And I welcome this review and thank my right honourable friend for bringing this statement to the House. Good leadership is important because good leadership drives the culture within an organisation, and we can see that where there is bullying, harassment, and it is terrible to hear about the member opposite's the description there, but where there is that bullying and harassment in an organisation, it does come down to how the leadership is actually operating and the processes. Whistleblowers within organisations need to know that they can rely on the processes within the organisations. The National Guardians would be one, and the local guardians within the hospitals. But who do they go to as well? I recently brought forward a whistleblowing bill to ensure that people are able to go to another body, that they can't be constricted within their organisation, and that we're able to actually get the benefit from whistleblowers who speak out, expose wrongdoing, and close down these cultures that we have seen, which have been operating within our organisations.
I think, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right about the importance of people that are working, whether it's in NHS or care, that they feel that where they see wrongdoing, they see things that really concern them, they have a safe space to report that and to make sure it's properly looked after. She will know that in the recent act that's come before Parliament, that the Health and Social Care Act, that there are new provisions in there, including for the Health, Safety and Investigation Board. But I've listened carefully to what she said and I will certainly consider what more we can do.
Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State might recall that I've had a long interest in management and good management with the all-party group on management. But is he aware, and this is, can I congratulate him having this review, because this is a complex organisation, the NHS, and the Topol review that was carried out only 2 or 3 years ago shows a world of technology and change almost beyond belief of a human massive organisation. But would he be sure, and I haven't had time to read this report yet, that we actually have the real high-quality training for our managers, because many of the business schools and many of the people in university providing the training aren't training for that kind of environment. So we do need first-rate, high-quality management schools with a health bias.
I agree with the honourable gentleman, and I know that he's got a long-standing, valuable interest in this issue, and I appreciate, of course, he hasn't had time to look at the report, but I think when he looks into the recommendations around a modern training plan, he will be pleased by what he reads.
Peter.
Speaker, I'm sure the most important thing that happened in Westminster this week was yesterday's reception for Harry's pledge. Harry is a young boy who needs a lot of care. Harry's pledge campaigns for the needs of carers and those who are cared for. I'm introducing a private member's bill to give guidance for that. And I wonder if the Secretary of State will look at that bill to see if the government can support it. Because leaders in care need to have the guidance to judge whether they are succeeding.
Mr. Speaker, it's a very important issue for my honourable friend. I'd be very happy to meet with him to discuss it further.
Right, Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. NHS staff are exhausted and demoralised, and now we're asking them to go again and deal with growing waiting lists. But we still have a huge vacancy problem within our NHS. So where is the plan to deal with that vacancy? If we're going to improve our NHS going forwards and have anything there for these managers to manage, we need to deal with that problem within the workforce.
And, Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the honourable gentleman, that is exactly why I've commissioned a 15-year workforce strategy from the NHS.
Luciano.
Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and congratulate him on the work that he has been doing in this really important area. Does he agree with me that for too long there has been a culture of lack of accountability with NHS senior management, and too often a blame culture where things go wrong but they are not transparently acknowledged, and how awful that is for the patients concerned? Can he do everything possible to ensure that we tackle the blame culture, we tackle the lack of accountability to the public, because the NHS is there to serve the public?
I agree very much with my honourable friend, and she will know from her own NHS trust, with particularly the maternity problems there, and what we saw recently, the very terrible cases that were set out in the Donna Ockenden report, just where that kind of culture can lead. Of course, there are fantastic examples day in, day out of great culture in the NHS and great leadership, but there are also these poor outcomes, and she's absolutely right that we need to tackle those, and that is exactly what's in this report today.
Alex Cunningham.
Mr. Speaker, I can't really understand why yet another restructure for the NHS is really the answer to the crisis that we face today. The last one diverted billions of pounds from patient care, and millions of people are suffering as a result. Instead of yet another costly restructure, why doesn't he just get on with building the new hospitals we need, like the one at North Tees in Stockton, and tackle the health inequalities that blight our communities?
Mr. Speaker, this is none of those things that the honourable gentleman claims.
Sir David Edinburgh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement today on this review and his strong support for inspirational leadership, which I think is a key for our NHS. Would he agree that relevant training and career development are absolutely vital for all staff working in the NHS to allow them to gain career advancement?
Yes, I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope the Secretary of State will agree that what is absolutely key is that managers in the NHS and local authorities can work together effectively. During the pandemic, I give great credit in Sheffield for the leaders in the CCG, the Hospital Trust, Director of Public Health, the social care directors in the City Council have worked really well together to deliver a joined-up service and have kept us as MPs thoroughly involved. As we move on to the slightly wider ICS and ICB, we'll give a commitment that the place-based working that has been so effective in the past will be allowed to continue at local authority level.
Mr. Speaker, the place-based working that the Honourable Gentleman talks about is also at the heart of the integration white paper that the government presented recently.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
I very much welcome Gordon Messenger's review, but does he not agree with me that in the history of the National Health Service, reorganising senior management has very often been a distraction? And would he prioritise the area which will make a real change to health and care, and that is the interface between the two, and focus on career progression and development for care workers in particular, who hold the key to unblocking the awful problems that we have in both sectors?
Mr. Speaker, I know my honourable friend speaks with experience, and I appreciate, of course, he wouldn't have had time to look at the report in detail yet, but I think when he does read it, he will find that this is precisely what he's just asked for. This is not a reorganisation. This is all about strengthening management, and it sets out in quite some detail how that can work.
Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I agree with the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead about NHS reorganisations? I once met a very senior and very able NHS manager who said they'd been through 14 restructures of the NHS and they quite like number 5. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me, can I ask the Secretary straight, how will this review better integrate ambulance services with their local hospitals to improve performance standards for local patients?
Well, when it comes to ambulance services as an important part of the NHS, this review is just as important because we all want to see good leadership in ambulance services. But if we get better leadership, even better across the board, we'll see better collaboration and coordination. That is something that is very heavily referred to in the report.
John Stevenson.
Mr. Speaker, welcome this statement, and leadership is absolutely vital. It's something we don't talk enough about in this country, whether it be in the private sector or the public sector. In his statement at point 6, he references non-executive directors. Would you agree that we need to attract a more diverse set of non-executive directors, particularly with regards to their skill set as much as anything else?
Yes, I do.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for his statement and for the commitment to quality leadership within the NHS. That is, as he said himself, is so important. The review findings and recommendations are a method to deliver that improvement. Retention of staff is core to any improvement, the consultants, the GPs, the doctors, the nurses. So what has been done to retain staff and not lose them? And is it the intention of the Secretary of State to share the findings with regional administrations, in particular Northern Ireland Assembly, to provide betterment across all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Thank you.
Well, the honourable gentleman will know that the review specifically looked at the NHS and care in England, but I do think there are important lessons here that can be drawn by, for example, the health service in Northern Ireland. On the issue of retaining staff, there are many initiatives the NHS is doing to improve that, but I hope the honourable gentleman would agree with me that one key way to retain staff is to make sure you have good leadership and good managers.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The review underlines how vital leadership is to drive change and improvements in care. And I want to put on record my thanks to the Chief Executive and the Board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Trust in King's Lynn, who've taken that hospital out of special measures thanks to the hard work of the staff. But as he knows, to continue to improve care, to retain and recruit staff, there's a pressing need for a new hospital at the QEH. So can I urge my right honourable friend to make an announcement on the new hospitals programme and to back QEH's bid?
I've heard my honourable friend very carefully, and he never misses an opportunity, rightly, to make sure that he's made the case for his local hospital. And as I say, I've heard him carefully. I'm happy to meet with him to discuss it.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement and for the report? Recommendation 4 talks about a standardisation of appraisal. Would he agree with me, therefore, that cutting out variation in performance is key? And therefore, will he confirm that the recommendations from Tim Briggs' Girth report will be embedded in that standardisation procedure?
Yes, I do agree with my honourable friend, and as he said, that this recommendation, like all of them, is particularly of importance about the consistency, having that standard appraisal system, which remarkably doesn't exist at the moment. But I do very much agree with the emphasis he's put on this.
Mr. Graham.
Mr. Speaker, the focus that the Health Secretary is giving to leadership management and training has to be absolutely right, because we all know that whether it's a CQC report on a hospital or an Ofsted report on a school, one of the key differences between adequate and outstanding is the quality of leadership. So all credit for focusing on that, and I think all of us would benefit from understanding what are the key characteristics of hospitals whose internal staff surveys show strongly positive morale, because that's often a key leading indicator too. Could my right honourable friend just say a word or two about the point raised by the honourable member for Easington? The report and what has come out of the North East Ambulance Service, I think, is truly shocking and does highlight what I think Sir Gordon Messenger called a need for a change of culture. How can we encourage all our NHS trusts to be absolutely open and transparent about what has gone wrong so that we don't have future scandals like this?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend will see when he's had the opportunity to read the report before. It does rightly talk about the importance of that particular issue, making sure that people within the NHS and care, for that matter, feel comfortable in coming forward when they see wrongdoing, so that we can act much more quickly. So that's why we'll be implementing all these recommendations. As with regard to North East Ambulance Trust, I hope he heard what I said earlier about the need to look at that again very carefully.
John Barrow.
As a former chair of the All-Party Group on Cancer for 10 years, I very much welcome this review, but I put to him that at least part of the problem when it comes to waiting times and lists is the fact that only around half of all NHS staff are clinically trained. There is an imbalance there. And may I suggest to him that one of the things that could really help is to get, following my amendment, which he accepted in the Health and Care Bill, to get the NHS to focus on outcomes like one-year cancer survival rates as a means of encouraging earlier diagnosis, and less on processes which are very management heavy.
Yes, I agree with my honourable friend.
Anna Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Health Secretary for this vitally important report at this critical time. But is the Secretary of State aware of reports circulating in the media that some NHS health information pages appear to have been desexed in their language about conditions affecting women? And is he, like me, very concerned about this, and will he look into it?
My honourable friend won't be surprised to learn, I hope, that as the Health Secretary, I think that an individual's biological sex is incredibly important when you're trying to meet their health needs. So I have seen the reports. In fact, I have to, I don't think they're just reports. I think actually, with respect to NHS website on ovarian cancer, I think it is actually the case that it has, as she put it, been desexed. That is not something that I agree with. I think that, of course, issues of gender rather than sex, and I distinguish, should be approached with compassion and sensitivity. But it is right when it comes to healthcare that where you have health issues that only impact people of a particular biological sex, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, for example, that the health service recognises that.
Jerome Bailey.
I'm very concerned that the review found evidence of a blame culture and responsibility avoidance.
We have to be clear that this culture is not just damaging, but it actually kills patients, because lessons are not learned from mistakes, but actively hidden. So what can we learn ourselves from the airline industry, who adopted a no-blame culture and through that adoption dramatically reduced airline-related deaths?
Mr. Speaker, it's precisely because of this important point raised by my honourable friend that when we had the recent bill before Parliament, now the Act, thanks to the will of this House, that we accepted the Safe Space Amendment.
Duncan Baker.
Speaker, I recognise the importance of leadership and reform of the NHS. Can we now show some leadership and reform, but in the area of NHS dentistry? It was the Labour government that wrecked NHS dentistry when they brought the contracts in, which have led to droves and droves of dentists that have left the profession. When we now have up and down the country and in North Norfolk, my constituents, who cannot see an NHS dentist, is it about time that we now reform these rotten contracts that the Labour Party brought in?
Yes. I mean, my honourable friend is right. I mean, it is well known how the Labour government, came up with contracts with the British Dental Association that is leading to poor outcomes for millions of people across the country. We've already made some short-term changes. We're in the process right now of making some longer-term strategic changes that will create all the right incentives.
A point of order, Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll remember that I recently challenged the Minister with an urgent question about the poor performance of the Passport Office. Now, a constituent who applied for a passport in February is due to travel next week. So, yesterday, after queuing up at Portcullis House, I found out that their extra paperwork has been stuck in the post room at Peterborough for 2 weeks and not taken forward. Now, Mr. Speaker, in recent weeks, I've tabled 10 or so written parliamentary questions seeking clarification on the size of the Passport Office backlog, the extra income received by the department after constituents had to apply for fast-track applications, and how soon the current 10-week turnaround for applications can be brought back down to the normal 3 weeks. Mr. Speaker, my reasonable questions are being dodged. The government's incompetence is worrying for families. They are afraid the bedlam will ruin their summer holidays. Mr. Speaker, how can I get these points on the record and the government to up its game and help families across our country?
Well, the one thing is, it's certainly now on the record again by the honourable member, and quite rightly, I don't think there's a member in here whose postbox hasn't had a problem with the passport situation. What I would say is I do expect questions to be answered quickly and not to be dragged out or lost somewhere in the system. But I would say it's not a point of order for me, but it's on the record. But I do take notice that when questions are laid, they should be answered as soon as possible. Right, as there's no further points of order, before I call the Minister to move the second reading, I wish to remind members of the House conventions which have a large number of members seeking to participate today. Members will recall that if they participate in the debate, they should be present throughout the opening speeches and the wind-up speeches, be present for most of the debate, and as a minimum remain in the chamber for at least 2 speeches after their own. Also, while we appreciate that interventions are important, a part of our debate, if members intervene repeatedly, they are likely to find themselves being called later in the debate than might have otherwise been the case, so that we all respect and treat each other fairly in the best possible way. Secretary of State. Well, Clerk. Michael, sorry, the Clerk's just going to read the orders.
Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, second reading.
I now call the Minister to move.